gubernatorial candidate, Mr. Kenneth Mapp, who is also former lieutenant governor, former senator, and his running mate, Mr. Osbert Potter. How are you doing today?
Fine. Good morning. How are you wonderful people doing?
All right, all right. It's good to have you in the house. It's good to finally sit down so we could have a good chat.
Yes, and thank you so much thank you so much for the invitation.
Yes,
we
sir.
certainly appreciate it.
Good morning to everyone, and again, it's a pleasure to be here. I've listened to the station a bit, and I like what I hear at the station, so we're looking forward. I was told that we're coming to the Lion's Den, though. I just want to let you know. So just thought I'll let you know that officially.
All right. Well, first of all, let's since you have the mic, just go ahead, introduce yourself, and welcome to.
Well, I am Osbert Potter. I was born in Tortola, British Virgin Islands. I came to St. Thomas at the age of 10. I went to Charlotte High School and the College of the Virgin Islands, now University of the Virgin Islands. I was elected to the 20th and 21st legislatures of the Virgin Islands. I served 4 rough years in the Senate. One of those terms I served with Kenneth Mapp. It was interesting. You learn a lot of stuff. Let me just say,
You were in the majority and I was in the minority.
That's a fact. But we were still able to, work together, which is the important thing. I spent 23 years in the National Guard, the Virgin Islands National Guard, so I've done that. I taught, the old computer systems and data processing at UVI for 13 years. I did that. People look at me today and say, "You taught computers?" Because now the people that I've taught in the past can wrap,
Right.
rings around me and all of that. But that's fine because I have seen a lot of the youngsters that I've taught actually owning their own businesses now and their own computer businesses, and that makes me feel really, really good. For the past 10 years, I've been the CEO for WTJX, the Virgin Islands Public Television System, where we try to make a difference and an impact in the people's lives here in the territory, both from an informational standpoint and educational standpoint, a preserver of the culture and history. I feel strongly about that, and that is the direction that I try to get Channel 12 to be pointed in. And I think we've been very successful in making Channel 12 something that's important and of value to the people of the Virgin Islands. So I'm ready to take on the bigger challenge of using some of the creative energy that I think I still have while I'm still young. Relatively speaking,
Yes,
okay,
sir.
okay,
Yes, sir.
General. To try and assist Governor Mapp here in us really building and rebuilding this territory and making it someplace where all of us as residents can be comfortable and enjoy ourselves and really have a productive territory for everyone. So with that in mind, I gladly accepted to the offer to run with Kenneth Mapp because I know that he really is extremely capable and ready to take on the task.
All right. And so to you, sir.
Well, good morning.
Good morning again.
I'm going to try to summarize because I don't know if I can use the term relatively young. I think I'm a new senior, but I'm certainly a product of the Virgin Islands. I was born in Brooklyn of Crucian parentage. Was raised on my grandparents' farm in Estate Rattan, and started school here in the Virgin Islands in the first grade and graduate of St. Croix Central High School, and went right back to New York City afterwards and ended up as a police trainee in the New York City Police Department. And I served 3.5 years in the 83rd Precinct in Brooklyn. It's only significant to the extent that it was a time of great gang violence and high drug addiction at the time in 73, 4, 5, and 6. And as a young person in the 83rd Precinct, as a trainee, a few of us were working with the gang units because of our affinity to be able to relate to young people. But I saw in that experience, I must say, in my entire life, the real worst of human behavior. I came home back to St. Croix and served 7-8 years in the Virgin Islands Police Department as a juvenile officer, as one of the security agents for Governor Wang Louis, elected to the Police Benevolent Association as president, which is a labor union, and was encouraged and pushed and cajoled by a Virgin Islands icon, Dr. Randall James, to really seek public office, and had no ambitions for it, but was really convinced to try, and I got elected to the 15th legislature at 27 years of age, and I think the rest is practically history. I've served in the cabinet of Governor Louis. I've worked in the Industrial Development Commission, which is now the EDA, as the assistant director. I shared a distinction with Osbert, who was the commissioner of the Department of Licensing and Consumer Affairs. I was the director of the Consumer Services Administration, its precursor, elected as lieutenant governor and served as the territory's commissioner of insurance and chairman of the banking board. Worked in the private sector. I think in St. Croix I'm noted for the reconstruction and rebuilding of the Caribbean Home Center properties, which are owned by local Virgin Islanders, and who purchased it, and 3 days after buying all the property, Hurricane Hugo blew it across the street. And all of its records, there was not a time of computers, and we literally I had just closed a $3.5 million loan with First Pennsylvania Bank, so reconstructing and rebuilding that business was quite a challenge. I went off and got my master's degree in public administration after my tenure as lieutenant governor, and came back, and Governor Charles Turnbull asked me to serve as the territory's director of the Public Finance Authority, which put me in a position to really get involved in municipal finance and work with the governor's financial team, and a whole lot of issues regarding that. And I like to say I'm in my fourth gubernatorial run, the third for myself. This is my third attempt at seeking the office of governor, but certainly I ran with Governor Roy Schneider, and we were successful back in 94 and served between 95 and 99, and subsequently to 2006, I own my consulting business, and I think a number of folks are fully aware in the sense that I've gone on behalf of my clients and testified before the Senate and regulatory bodies. And I'm very excited, to say the least, about running for governor this tenure. I wasn't quite sure I was going to do this again. I wasn't quite sure where we as a people really wanted to go with our future. And having served in the public arena and really believe truly to the core that public service really is an honor, and it is about delivering value to the community, and it requires, on my view, a very strong work ethic, and I think I've really attempted to practice that in the opportunities that the people of the Virgin Islands have given me. And so when I approached Osbert to invite him onto the ticket, we had a lot of conversations about our approaches to the issues and the problems that affect the territory, and how we think is best to deal with them, and why Osbert Potter became very important to me in terms as a consideration and a choice, because I think the next step in the Virgin Islands, the next step of the Virgin Islands governance is really about productivity. It is really about standards, it's about value, and it's about high integrity. And when you look at Osbert Potter's background and his ability to work in the public sector, not to have a job, not to have a position, but to actually get in an organization, lead it, create value, have employees that are productive, and be able to produce for the people of the Virgin Islands, that was very attractive to me. And so in many of our hours of conversations before agreeing and being able to say, and shake hands and say we're going to run as a team to take the Virgin Islands through many of the challenges that affect the community. It was very important to really talk about the challenges that lay ahead and how we wish to approach them. For us, this is not stressful and really not that difficult, because the next election is about whether the people of the territory wish to approach the management of their affairs in a different way, or whether the people of the community feel that the way we are managing our affairs, we can continue that way. And that's, for me, in my view and perspective, not so difficult of a choice for the people to make. And I think that the candidates who are all running should all be given credit, because running for public office is not easy. And when one runs, it's about offering themselves in service. I think what is important is what each of the candidacies provide and offer to the community. And that is the difference in terms of the philosophy of how we would be approaching the issues and how we would view them. And so I am very happy, and I can say we are very happy to be able to come before the people of the Virgin Islands and talk about many of these vexing challenges and approaches and the manner in which we need to deal with the public affairs of the community.
All right. And so you basically answered my first question as to why are you running and why do you think you'll win this time around. So you got that all compiled in your first intro right here. So here's a precursor. So I've got some challenging questions for you. Sure. That I'd like us to get out of the way, as I'm sure you'd love to delve into your platform and what you intend to do if elected the next governor. Said questions are coming in sequence, and they are important because they deal with character, as you just mentioned. As this election is one about character and value. An ingredient, after looking at where we are now in our territory, I think one would say is of utmost importance. So let's talk about VI Decision 2014, the gubernatorial forum held at Speak the Word some 2 Sundays ago. Your team confirmed that you'd participate in the event, yet last minute you decided to disembark, to the disappointment of the organizers, the hundreds of Christians in attendance, and those connected via the radio and Ustream. Yet what was even more striking was the reason behind your pullout, which, and I've been privy to the information, was a calculation based on other candidates in attendance. Apparently, you thought that the Democratic candidates would gang up on you, so the decision was made to forfeit your commitment to come. And apparently, you didn't want to sit next to Delegate Christensen? Now, Lieutenant, I'm sorry, but why are we playing hide and seek in what's undoubtedly the most important election season in the VI history? It seems to me that many candidates are taking this for a joke once more, dodging tough questions, staying away from forums, shielding their running mates from attending lieutenant-specific events at the recent Chamber of Commerce Forum, and the like. The islands are in dire need of a leader who is ready and able to lead, one who's also ready to make tough decisions, and who isn't afraid to face the people. Yet you pulled out Lieutenant Mapp at the last minute. Can you please explain why you did so?
Well, first of all, I have no clue where you got that information, because the invitation was sent to us in May about the forum at Speak the Words Ministry, and our first response in May was that we declined. We never agreed to participate in that forum. We never said to anyone that we would participate in the forum, and our discussion and our decision in May 12th was because we are not a part of the primary election. Pastor Dexter Skeppel called our territorial chair on several occasions, trying to convince us that we should change our mind. And we suggested to the pastor that it was more appropriate for us to participate in a forum after the primary. We are not in the primary election, so we have no business sitting down with contenders in an election for which we are not a part of. Okay. So I have no clue where you got the information that we said we would come. When that information arrived, the young lady that manages our calendar, when that letter was sent to us, we simply said we would not attend. We had no further conversations about it. Pastor Skeppel thought he could convince our territorial chair that we ought to attend, and we were very consistent that we don't participate in discussions for which are not appropriate for us to participate. So all of what you read, I have no clue where you got that.
As one of the coordinators of the event,
Sure.
we never got any formal. Nobody declined when we sent out, because I was the one who personally dropped off the letter to I think one of your campaign members, Mr. Schuster, because at the time you were in St. Thomas with your campaign manager.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes, and then
Mr. Schuster this year?
Yes. He was the one that got the original invitation.
Okay.
Because you and your campaign manager were not on island at the time.
So
you guys were in St. Thomas. Yes, and then when we followed up, I forgot his name. He works in the office. He works at your headquarters, and he also had said that you guys would be there. It wasn't until the Friday that Mr. Johnson called and said that you guys were not thinking about coming because of the primary candidates being at the forum.
From the original inception of that letter, we declined to participate. And I know that Pastor Skeppel and Mr. Johnson have had at least 4 conversations from May up until the afternoon of the only way I could reference is I guess 2 Saturdays ago when it was Miss Dolores Hanson's birthday party. And the final invitation or attempt by Pastor Skeppel to get us to participate was an invitation extended to me to sit in the audience and observe the forum this Saturday. But I never agreed to participate in the forum. It would not have been appropriate to participate in the forum because you have to look at it in the context of if you have a national election between Democrats and Republicans, and just think of the last election when President Obama was running for re-election. You had 7 members of the Republican Party going across the country and having debates so that the party can select a candidate to be in the election. It would not have been appropriate if someone in the Democratic Party showed up and stood up on the platform with the Republicans. That's a party issue. We are not running on a party label, and so we're not vying to be the representative of the party, so we have no business in a platform when the party is trying to decide who it's going to select. If you're an ICM, an independent, or a Republican voter, you cannot vote for any of those candidates in the primary. So why would independent candidates sit in a forum when the party is trying to decide who they want to represent them in the general election? So what you read, and I don't mind. I mean, it's the business of public service. That was a resounding indictment for something. I mean, we were charged, tried, and accused without, any evidence to support that. I have to answer this, but we have no fear in having a conversation about the issues with anyone. We simply want to be in an environment that is appropriate for us to be in and that has a semblance of objectivity. And I only say that term in reference to your reference to 2010.
And let me just indicate that there have been some forums held in St. Thomas, for example, that were the same type of forums, the Democratic forums, where you did have all of the Democrats only invited to come and participate. And Kenny is correct, I was not...
thing is, it wasn't a democratic forum.
And I
so
understand. And I understand
for
your
all the
point.
candidates.
I understand your point.
Right.
But the bigger point is that you have all the Democrats who still have to decide, who is going to represent the party. Because I will tell you, and I can, tell you that clearly now. Once that primary is done and there's someone selected, we will gladly come and sit and do it, an hour, 2 hours, 10 hours, because at that point, we are ready to sit and go through with the one that's representing the Democratic Party and give the voters of the territory a clear choice and an opportunity to hear from both parties clearly on all the issues that's facing us. And I think it's just, unfortunate that it turned out that way, but it wasn't, anything to basically...
It wasn't something that was planned at all. It was
it turned out that way,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Right.
But we stand ready once the primary is done, whoever the Democrats select to
Right.
come and sit in the same type forum with
Okay.
that candidate and the other independent candidates that would be entering in the race.
Oswald, you should add to the conversation that we have gone to radio stations, as we are in your radio station, individually as candidates and open ourselves to be fully questioned. We've never asked anybody to send any questions to us in advance or anything like that.
Right.
But we don't. It's just not appropriate. I mean, you just don't do that. You have the processes of election, and I think the district court, the judge, in the ruling of the Kofelt matter, again was very implicit. It's an issue of a party process and then an election for the community.
Right.
And that's the whole issue of why people go and say, I want to register as a Democrat, or I want to register, because unlike some places in America where everybody could vote in any election, in the Virgin Islands, primaries are designated simply for party candidates, and then those who are registered to that party would make their selections, and then we all end up in a race really for the community. And I just give this caution that one of the things about inviting candidates is about making sure that we're sort of giving the folks in the organization who are sort of responsible in terms of, I mean, if you went to the office, we certainly have folks working in the office.
Oh, no one was there that weekend.
I'm sorry?
No one was there that week.
Right, but I'm just saying in terms of and just, leave the name, numbers, and the appropriate folks would call. But we just had no place in that conversation, because the Democratic Party has its philosophy, it has its beliefs, its value system. There's a reason why folks register as Republicans, and then there's a reason why folks registered as independents.
Okay, so we're going to move on. Concerning that again, just the point of, you keep on saying that the Democrats have their philosophy. I do understand. Yeah. But again, it wasn't a forum specifically geared towards Democrats alone. It was a forum for everybody, and various questions were asked. And so it wasn't, I understand your point of, not being, at a forum where exclusively Democrats are, but you had independent candidates there. You had Soraya Diaz-Kofelt. And so
it's not our fault because other people don't know what they ought to be doing. Okay, let's be clear.
Okay,
meaning that the other candidates, if because the voters are going to the poll on August 2nd to make a decision,
right? And
they're listening to the conversations of these candidates, trying to determine of that pool who they want to select.
Right.
Now, I have folks who have organizations are certainly entitled to put any kind of event that they want to put together.
Right.
That's fine, but we're working through a process, and as the candidates, we have to understand the process and work with the process that the law sets forth. Okay. And that's what we're doing.
Okay, so let's move forward. Let's deal with another situation that's dogged you for years, and from what I've gathered in recent times has actually been inaccurate in that the words used to demean your character weren't precise. I'm referring to the Hurricane Marilyn incident when it was alleged that you said St. Croix people are greedy and that all we wanted was handouts. That didn't sit too well with the people, especially in the case of Hurricane Marilyn, which rampaged through the VI. But you've contended that most of the damage was seen on St. Thomas, yet people say up to this day that they've decided they're not going to put a man in office who was insensitive to their needs in a time of catastrophe and severe distress. So, is it true that you call the people of St. Croix greedy? And please take us through the events which led to this scandal, and if at all possible, clear your name once and for all.
Well, first, I wasn't accused of calling anybody greedy.
Well, that's what's out there. So, and what I've heard is that you actually didn't say such. So I'm just giving you the opportunity to clear your name because it's out there. Sure, people are saying that that's what he said during the hurricane season, and because of it. Honestly, it's out there in the public, and I'm just giving you an opportunity to.
We've certainly heard it.
Okay.
The events are pretty much this. During the preparation for Hurricane Marilyn, and I think all of us had learned the lesson from the Farley Hodge administration with Hugo in terms of preparing for storms, and Governor Schneider led certainly our administration was the first administration that really mobilized for hurricanes. And in that process, Governor Schneider asked me to oversee, and I was beyond St. Croix, the issues regarding St. Croix. to make a long story short, Hurricane Marilyn passed, FEMA and the military arrived. There was a distribution of MRAs. There was an analysis done of the islands in terms of damages. Much of the damages, the island of St. Croix were not damaged. The significant damage and the destruction of stores and businesses occurred in St. Thomas, St. John. There was a decision that needed to be made after the first wave of distribution of the MREs, and the decision would be whether the FEMA would distribute canned food from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, canned chicken, ham, etc., or the federal government would liberalize the qualifications for food stamp and issue food stamps across the territory, and folks could just simply go and buy the food because the businesses were open. And I made the decision that we were not interested in a wave of additional distribution of food products on St. Croix. We would go to food stamps. If I remember the statistics, about 11,000 families on St. Croix shared in $18 million in the distribution of food stamps. A number of members of the legislature took, I'll use the Crucian term, took umbrage that I would accept the food stamp as opposed to accepting another wave of distribution of food products. Some members were so adamant that food products should be given as opposed to food stamps that they went to private supermarkets and claimed to have gotten food and went around the territory giving it out. In the controversy, when we had the November 1st function at Grove Place, I stood up in the formal function at Grove Place, and I talked about this controversy. And I used the analogy that Antigua, for example, had been ravaged like St. Thomas and St. John. But unlike the Virgin Islands, Antigua and St. Martin and those islands that were destroyed by Marilyn did not have a national government to come to their rescue. In point of fact, the hospital in Antigua was obliterated, and the Queen of England gave them a mere $25,000 for the reconstruction. In the case of the Virgin Islands, who were obliterated, there was no question we got more than $100 million in a variety of aid from our national government. And I talked about the history of the people of the Virgin Islands in terms of how we work, how we were raised, and this controversy about giving out food is something that we should take offense at. The St. Croix Avis, in a story following that, printed a headline that said, "Mapp, stop begging." That's what the Avis printed. And in the last two campaigns, people have gone and got that article. And when they read the article, there was nowhere in that article that I either used the term greedy nor used the term beggar. In point of fact, in the 2006 or the 2010 election, we made a public announcement because the bull and bread ceremonies are recorded by radio stations, they're recorded by television stations. You can go and get the programs. We said to the community, to our detractors, let's put it that way, that if you produced a recording or a writing where I was ascribed to have a speech and used the term begging, you now raise the issue of greedy. The term was begging. We would give them $1,000. I still have my $1,000 in my pocket. So the point I'm making is that, the point I want to make is that in the public life, I've done it for 32 years, people are going to criticize, and they're going to create stories, and they're going to accuse you of things that you have not done or have not said. The question is whether you just focus on that or you focus on the issues at hand. And I think in the 32 years of public service that I have demonstrated to this community, that I've really tried to remain focused on the issues at hand.
Right.
And let me just interject. You know, I don't have to come to the rescue of Kenneth Mapp. I really don't. But it's clear from my observation, I was not in the Mapp Siku campaign in the last election. I was just a regular citizen too. But you see that individuals who, and this is my strong opinion, individuals who realize that Kenneth Mapp is fully competent and capable to do and face the task at hand, and understand the finances of this territory, understand the economics, understand that to stay with what I call fringe issues that's just outside on the edges, okay, and not focus on the meat of what this whole campaign is about, because you can spend every day 24/7 on all the different things on the outskirts and not at any point get to the meat of the issues that's affecting us in the territory. And those that are against Kenneth Mapp being elected would want to keep the conversation there. And it's up to us to try to make sure that the conversation does not just stay there, because there's a lot of things that's facing this territory that need to be built up. You know, our slogan is a time to build, and we need to build on those things. We need to not labor and belabor the points of things that are not that critical. I know you preface the question about one of character and all of that, and that is important. So I don't want to say that character is not important, but to have people and to have the conversation just remaining just on the outer edges of things that are not at the heart of what we are looking at for this campaign is going to be wasting a lot of time and energy, to me, that should be focused on exactly how we're going to approach governing this territory going forward.
Okay, so we have believe me, we got most of our questioning coming next is all economy, all crime, all that important stuff. But like I said with my precursor, it is important. And I think when tough questions are asked, I think that a candidate has the opportunity to come out of it shining, you know, and come out of it stronger and more respectable in the eyes of the people listening. So we've done this with every candidate. You know, are there issues out there that's dogging you, that's challenging you? What are the people saying? We try to make it known and challenge the candidate, and so come out on the other side. You don't seem to have a problem with it, do you?
No, I think it's fine, you know.
Okay.
But
okay.
My position was, you know, we see it continuously where, you know, individuals realize that they have to focus the stuff elsewhere,
right,
in order to really try to get any headway with this team and how we plan to approach things.
Right.
That's
okay.
all I'm saying.
So just one more tough question, and then we're gonna go to all economy, all crime.
Those were tough questions.
They weren't. Those were easy. Okay. Those were easy. All right. All right. One more tough question, in terms of again finding out, because what we've seen over the years, Lieutenant Mapp, is that especially now where we at the lowest point we've been in a long time in terms of economy, the morale of the people as to how they think about government and those serving. There's a high level of corruption in government. And so I think one of the most indelible characteristics of the next governor should be his or her character. And so that is why I prefaced this entire thing with my little precursor concerning.
Well, if I can just add this in, part of how you demonstrate character in terms of public service, because I think part of, and it's legitimate, don't get me wrong, part of the conversation when folks run for public office is, and this is not a negative turn, is a convolution of personal versus public good. Mm-hmm. And when folks run for public office, there should be sort of a demonstration of being able to do the public good. And in the case of Osbert Potter and myself, who have executive administrative experience. Now, if you haven't managed agencies and handled public monies that you are specifically accountable for because you actually signed the checks, you could make this claim. But I have been the subject of at least 4 or 5 federal and or local audits of the 5 agencies I have managed. And not a single audit has asked me where a nickel is. And I could say the same about Mr. Potter. That's a demonstration of character and integrity. I've never been accused, Mr. Potter's never been accused by a contractor that they were cajoled to do something outside the realm of their contract to provide personal benefit. Those are the demonstrations of character in your service to the public.
Okay, and so to this end, I want to ask this question. And I think it's something that it arose some time back. Another major problem that you faced pertains to payments made to you by a company owned by Innovative LLC, which was located in St. Martin, while you were still serving as Lieutenant Governor with Governor Snyder, to the tune of $25,000 a month. It's been speculated countless times whether this was an inducement of sorts, where by you getting such an overly lucrative contract for being trained, that you'd use your office's capacity to return the favor when the company needed it. The payments of $25,000 for training you were approved for 2 years, and I have the article from the St. John Times, and yet you were never hired by the company. So the sum of $600,000 was paid to you by a company in St. Martin, which was owned by Innovative Corporation, and yet they never hired you to perform a work. And that would be all fine if you weren't serving in public office, but at the time, or for much of it, you were the Lieutenant Governor of the Virgin Islands. So how do you explain this conundrum where a company owned by Innovative is paying you $25,000 a month to train you while you were yet the Lieutenant Governor of the Virgin Islands?
I'm going to respond to your question, but this is the third time you've asked me, have you stopped beating your wife? You haven't asked me if I beat my wife. You've left me, you've asked me, and you read these articles as if the information that you're providing is accurate. Mm-hmm. Let me say to you that I never received any remuneration, any payments from any company while I have served in any public office, including that of the office of Lieutenant Governor. Mm-hmm. We have had this conversation, and the record is clear, including the results of a U.S. Internal Revenue Service investigation. Mm-hmm. When I left my tenure as Lieutenant Governor, I was contracted as a consultant with Innovative Communication. Mm-hmm. Part of my consulting agreement provided for me to be able to go to school, which I did, and to complete a course at Harvard Business School for work with a company in an international environment. Mm-hmm. Innovative Communications not only owned companies in the U.S. Virgin Islands, but owned businesses and operations for cable and telephones in the French charter for a franchise for providing telephone and cable operations. Whether I got paid from a French side of the company or the U.S. side of the company, I was required to file my taxes and pay my tax obligations on these earnings. Okay, and that simply was done. This particular conversation, I'm not quite sure if I understand the logic behind it. I don't know if I understand the logic behind it. Companies are in the territory. They hire local folks to do work. They contract them. I have been hired as late as 2014 as a consultant for private concerns in the Virgin Islands. I did not receive any money when in public service. I had no control over any of the issues regarding Innovative in my role as Lieutenant Governor. And as most people will remember, the straw that broke the camel's back with my relationship with Governor Schneider was my opposition to the tax exemptions that were provided to the Innovative Communications.
Right. So you're done? Okay.
I don't know what else you want me to tell you.
No. Because it goes on and on about the firm apparently not having an office, no website, no business cards, no stationery.
Well, you're reading from Attorney Lee Rohn's. You're reading now. I know what you're reading. You're reading from an opponent of mine who has been an opponent of mine because of a decision that I made as Commissioner of Insurance regarding clients of her in her pursuit of dollars having to do with a collapse of an insurance entity under Hurricane Hugo.
Right.
And what you are reading is from the script sheet that Attorney Lee Rohn wrote and continued to fester and pay and have websites and put up to give this claim that somehow I am in the pockets of Jeff Prosser, and I used to run around and do Jeff Prosser's bidding.
Right.
Now, that's not an issue that has ever been legitimized. Attorney Lee Rohn has gone to, as I said, as far as the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. providing these claims and indicating that these things had taken place, and they have not taken place.
Okay.
And you are reading that script to me and saying, well, I still want you to defend this propaganda that Attorney Rohn has written. And what I'm suggesting, and I think what Mr. Potter suggested to you, is either we're going to stay, I could sit here and any criticism that I've had for 32 years, we can talk about that. Or we can have some conversations about the issues that are affecting the territory.
This is what is coming right now. Like I said, we had to deal with this, this character issues, and basically you make yourself clear. And I think you did a great job at, defending your character and who you are. That is what I believe Tough Questioning is about, and so let's move on then.
You
to the
keep
issues.
calling them tough questions.
Okay, so they're not tough. Okay, the good stuff. All right. Tough as our days have been in the past in the Virgin Islands, we haven't seen such hardship as we are now experiencing. Literally everyone's struggling to pay one bill or another. Our skilled people and youth are living in droves. WAPA continues to viciously rampage businesses and residents. Our unemployment rate is amongst the highest in the U.S., and jobs are hard to come by. Yet our annual budget is close to $1 billion. $1 billion to govern 110,000 people. Yet said budget isn't reflected on the quality of life. I have more specific economic questions, but tell me, what's your grand scheme to lift these islands out of our current state economically?
Well, the biggest obstacle to economic growth, the biggest driver that's destroying the middle class of the Virgin Islands and creating flight of the middle class out of the Virgin Islands, is called the cost of energy, 52 cents a kilowatt hour. As late back as 2010, this was a big issue, and in the campaign then, the cost of electricity in the Virgin Islands was 26 cents a kilowatt hour. I have followed personally the program and the projects that the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority has been pursuing to reduce the cost of energy in the Virgin Islands. And I agree that the implementation and use of liquid propane gas, or more importantly, the diversification of how we produce electricity, will drive a reduction in the cost of energy in the territory. But WAPA's $100 million investment and its reduction, or its ability to save us just 30 cents on the dollar for electricity, is not going to be sufficient. Because you just do the math, you take 20 cents off of 52 cents, and you're at 30-something cents a kilowatt hour. Puerto Rico's Government Development Bank wrote a report around December of last year. And this is important only because the Government Development Bank of Puerto Rico has been involved, whether by financing ownership of more than 80% of the 10,000 plus hotel rooms on the island of Puerto Rico. And it did a report about the strategy for economic growth and expansion in Puerto Rico, and noted that one major obstruction to Puerto Rico's rebounding economy will be the cost of electricity in Puerto Rico, which is now 21 to 24 cents. So if you can't bill an economy on 21 cents a kilowatt hour, you certainly can't bill it on 30 cents a kilowatt hour. What I have been recommending and saying to the people of the Virgin Islands, and what Mr. Potter and I are recommending, is further diversification of the production of electricity through the use of clean coal. Coal is an abundant source on the U.S. mainland. It is one of its chief advocates is President Barack Obama, and it produces electricity at 8 to 10 cents a kilowatt hour. We have had coal-fired generators here on St. Croix, at Mart Merida, St. Croix Renaissance, Harvey Aluminum. The boat comes in, it deposits the coal in a silo, the plant burns the coal, the boat takes the ashes out because it's a highly recyclable product, the ash from the coal. We have already achieved in America the scrubbing and technology to ensure that the contamination from the burning of coal does not affect the health and well-being of American citizens. Coal remains the largest single source of electrical production in the nation. I and Mr. Potter are advocates for the use of renewable energy such as solar and wind. But while the price and the cost of the infrastructure for that platform continues to decline, we have to admit that if you went from diesel, which we're on, directly to renewable energy, the cost of electricity in the Virgin Islands will go up before it can come down, and the economy cannot sustain that. And so what we are willing and prepared to ensure that we do as a primary project, because it has to be done first, because you can't build the economy, you can't fix anything in the Virgin Islands if we do not reduce significantly the cost of electricity in the Virgin Islands. We pay about $250 million a year only for the oil that turns the generator. Coal is 10% of that cost. Do the math. So that you can implement not a total transformation at the Water and Power Authority of running all of the generators on coal, but if you try to achieve a 40, 50, 55% of your peak demand on coal-fired generators, you can bring the cost of electricity significantly down. You will have the money to amortize or mortgage the new generators over a 20-year cycle and produce savings to the Virgin Islands community. One of the final things I want to note on the issue of energy is that today the Water and Power Authority is not able to manage the production of electricity based on demand, which simply says that as we see across the territory, businesses, government offices, and homes go to renewable energy sources and get off the grid or do net metering, the Water and Power Authority is not able to bring down the amount of current it produces because the generators produce X amount. So when you turn them on, if it produces 20 megawatts of current, but the community is only drawing 10, it's burning oil for 20, and it doesn't have any ability to store electricity. In diversifying how we produce electricity, that allows us to use smaller generators in the plant and then create a system where they can ramp up the productivity based on the demand of the community. Why is this very important? Because the next industry that's going to take the Virgin Islands forward in a meaningful way and save an entire generation of young people is e-commerce. But e-commerce cannot work on a platform of 50 cents a kilowatt hour, 30 cents a kilowatt hour, or 20 cents a kilowatt hour. And I know I went a very long way to answer, but I want you to understand that our consideration of this issue has been very involved and very important.
Before you go to him, just to you'll come to him there. I like the explanation you gave. WAPA being semi-autonomous, let's say you are elected the next governor. What steps would you take to ensure that the vision that you just outlined be implemented?
The majority of the members of the board of the Water and Power Authority serves in the cabinet of the governor.
Right. So that's so you're willing to get rid of some people, change.
You see, that's not fair. It's not about willing to get rid of anybody. There must be I think there must be a recognition that I believe that I have to believe that all of the folks, or most of the folks on the board of the Water and Power Authority, want cheaper electricity. I think the issue in the Virgin Islands is the change in the Virgin Islands really only require really two things. It requires a powerful vision and courage. Because you got to recognize that if you're spending as a community, if we're spending $250 million a year just for the fuel, and we're saying we're not going to spend more than $70 million or $50 million for fuel, somebody's feelings going to get hurt. And so it has to have a demonstration of courage to say this is the policy that we're going to be pursuing. We have another issue that impacts this reality, and it's happening across the nation on energy production, where people are going to renewable energy because the platforms for doing it is much cheaper. So it's getting in the way that you can do it now in your home, and you only need to buy power at night because you can get renewable energy sources in the day. And energy companies across America, and we are seeing it in the Virgin Islands, are getting all uncomfortable because it's affecting their revenue streams. We see a bill in the legislature now that is trying to cap the net metering program, meaning that if you want to put in renewable energy, that's fine, but WAPA don't have to buy the power. Well, if you don't do net metering, the investment isn't worth it to you because you're going to raise your power bill and not have a savings. That is just like looking at the time when we had telephone companies with landlines, AT&T and Mapp. And if they looked at cell systems coming in and cellular phones coming in and decided, you know what, we need to go to the government and get them to put a law in the books that says you have to keep your landline because everybody's getting a cell phone. Obviously, the government couldn't do that. But what did the companies realize they had to do? Landline phones weren't going to work. So they had to get in another business and they had to transform. And it's the same thing that we have to look at with the Water and Power Authority. It's not how we're going to try to make a policy or a rule that keeps money going to run that operation. It's how that operation is going to transform with technology, recognize its importance to the economy, bring costs down, and become more efficient. And that means that the Mapp Potter administration are going to have to be at the forefront to say how are we going to produce energy immediately to build the economy, how we're going to produce energy in 5 years, and how we need to be producing energy in 10 years. And how is that transformation of technology and changes in the way we're building economies across this nation and the globe going to work so that people of the Virgin Islands benefit with economic growth and not a weighted process of we're just trying to sustain a type of jobs and type of involvement as opposed to moving with the reality of what the future requires.
Okay.
Let me say this. In order to resolve a problem, you must have a good understanding of the problem. And I think basically and fundamentally, a lot of people don't analyze things that way. You cannot just attack a problem or approach a problem with Band-Aid solution. It cannot work.
Right.
If you do not have a deep and thorough understanding of all the components that make up that problem, then there's no way you can do a comprehensive approach to resolving it. And this is going to take a comprehensive approach. You cannot just wake up in the morning and for the first time say, oh, wow, WAPA, what are we going to do? You know, that is not going to work. You must understand the different aspects of the problem to see whether you can put a lot of pressure in this area, ease up here, adjust this, and as a result, come up with a comprehensive way of making sure that it's going to work with proper analysis. And I'm telling you, this is our approach to resolving problems. You don't just wake up one day and decide, okay, what are we going to do? You have to study the problem. And give me one other second here. This is going to have, as far as economic development, such a domino effect, okay? Because once you can, in fact, get that cost of WAPA, of power down, you can see the impact it will have on small businesses. Small businesses are getting choked. They are getting stifled. They are getting killed. They have to get up and leave. Small businesses, once you understand and recognize that small businesses are the backbone of the economy. Some people say it because they have heard people say it, but don't really quite understand that it's a fact. When you have a small business that may have 10 employees, and because of the cost of just turning on their lights and plugging in their fridge or whatever, have to then make a decision, well, I probably have to send home 4 of these employees because I cannot pay them. The money I'm going to pay them, I have to pay to WAPA. Otherwise, I'm going to have to shut down completely. That domino and rippling effect is a real effect. Right. And if, in fact, we cannot get to the point where that initial problem is attacked and remedied, small businesses are going to be extinct.
They're becoming extinct even now.
Yeah. They are going to be extinct, and you cannot expect the government to pick up the slack of employees that have been let off and released by small businesses because they can't afford to keep them. when you let these employees go, you also are now losing tax revenues, and that tax base is going to be eroded. That's problematic. That is seriously problematic. It's like a cancer that's just going to spread unless you get to the source. And this is what we're saying. We, in looking at what is facing us, we know it's going to be a difficult task, but you have to understand the source. It's not just simply saying, okay, small businesses have it rough, let's reduce the gross receipt tax and figure that that is something unto itself that's going to save and rescue this community. It's not. You have to look at the base and core of the problem, and that's how you must analyze the problems going into the future here in the Virgin Islands, or else we are just going to see people throw hands up in the air and just sit back and figure, well, we are here doomed. We are trying to offer the public a serious alternative to how business is done in the territory. And that is why we are here as a team. That is why we have had several hours of discussions on these serious matters, because unless and until, we get a handle on certain specific things in this community, we are going to be in serious trouble, and it's going to be a spiral that's just going downward unless you can stop it and then build on it. And that is where, and I know we talk a lot, and I know a time to build is premise on that. It's a time to build and rebuild this community.
Okay.
I think I appreciate your proposal for a solution, and I think with your wealth of experience in the political arena as well as in public service, you know how long it takes for things to be implemented anywhere, and in particular on St. Croix. And just in visiting, I'm home for the summer, I've heard people talk about how painful it is to live here and the choices that they're making in order to
$14 a gallon.
I have sticker shock every time I go to the grocery store. I'm in shock every time.
That's what 52 cents a kilowatt hour does.
That's what it does. So my question for you is, I really would love to see politicians in the Virgin Islands. I'm not saying that they do it any better in the States, but I would love to see politicians in general really speak to the present pain of people and what they're experiencing, with the reality that what you're proposing, which sounds excellent, will probably take more than 4 years. It may take your entire tenure. I don't know.
Believe that it would, and I'll say why.
Mm-hmm.
One, the national policy is to have a reduced reliance on foreign oils and fuels. It's very important to the economic growth of the nation. Two, the Obama administration is a major advocate for the use of clean coal because it's an American commodity, it drives jobs in America, and it reduces cost in the economy. Three, the largest single producer of energy in the United States still remains coal, so that the EPA and the ability for technology and scrubbers to be in place to ensure clean emissions is in place. So the question comes down to, how do we sit down and formulate a process to get from where we're at to begin the implementation and the use? St. Croix becomes one of the first primary locations for the diversification and the use of clean coal because of our topography and our harbor on the South Shore and the industrial area. Mm-hmm. And when you start implementing it, it brings the cost down across the territorial grid so everybody benefits. Mm-hmm. And you have major producers, and I have no company or no consultants, we don't have anybody that has lined up. But there's no question that across the electrical grid of America, many U.S. companies produce the generators that are producing the electricity. So the ability to find one and to discern and whittle it down to who we need to bring in to be able to get the generators, to install them, to build the scrubbers, and to implement them. I'm just sorry. Maybe I ain't been at this long enough. It can't take 4 years. When we were doing the Frederickstead project, and we began that in 2002, and that's easier than all the emission issues, folks said that can't ever happen. Mm-hmm. And, Governor Turnbull led that through, and it was done from scratch, without $1 in the bank, from planning with the community to its construction in less than 4 years.
Right.
So it can happen if the will and the drive to happen. I think I agree that many folks in the public sector are committed to working, and they work hard. In my experience in managing government entities, I've seen the difference when there's an application of effective leadership. Not going in and having friends and you do what you want and then over here everybody have to work, but to be able to sit in an organization and say, for example, as Mr. Potter and I will head the administration, to select a cabinet, and for folks to understand in the cabinet, we're giving you an opportunity to assist us in building a better Virgin Islands. But we're not keeping your job for you. We're going to hold you accountable. Right. And that means you have to get into your agency and manage and lead your organization, and it has to be a part of our vision on how we're going to get to a better place.
Right.
And we don't have forever to do that.
Exactly. But speaking to the present pain of the people, this will take time to implement.
Yes,
and in the meantime,
yes,
the prices of whether it's LEAC, whether it's the electric
That's
bill,
right,
whatever, is going up.
I am
and
going to concede.
So in regards
Yes,
to actually speaking to the present pain of
yes,
people, while you're working hard on
yes,
implementing
that's
what
right,
could be an excellent game-changing proposal and solution,
yes,
what do we tell the people? How do we motivate, encourage, in a short term? We're talking about long-term solutions, but there are short-term problems.
Yes.
And I'm interested in how politicians, while they're busy at work, actually empower people to survive the crisis that they're experiencing on the ground. And so that's my question in regards to, I love the future proposal, and I really want to know your thought processes of how to.
Well, to the credit of the Water and Power Authority, and I said I took it personally to follow them by going to the regulatory hearings and sitting in the back of the room and then doing the research and not getting on the public stage with it. To the credit of the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority, we have to give them credit. This implementation of the use of liquid propane gas will bring about a 30% plus reduction in energy. And how can I say that with some level of confidence? I can say that because one of the very smart things that they did is they entered into hedge agreements at a time when liquid propane gas was low, that locks in the price for liquid propane gas going forward for 3-4 years. So that the last winter that we had that spiked propane gas, they're not affected by that because the commodity hedges that they entered protect them. Because of commodity hedging is betting. If the price went down, they would still have to pay the higher price. If the price go up, then they get to pay the lower price. And that was a very smart thing that they did. And if you look at your LEAC, let's just forget 30%.
Yeah.
If you look at your LEAC and your bill, if your LEAC is $300 or $200, and they are able to save you 25%, that's a $50 savings a month. And now that's not a solution in terms of long term, and that's not going to last forever. But we have to do other diversified issues in terms of the production of electricity. But I can say with some level of confidence that single action by the Water and Power Authority will bring benefits to the community.
And in the process, people have to have confidence in their leaders. Okay, I think that's important. It's important for the mindset of the individuals out there that they have confidence in the ability of their leaders to, number one, understand what is going on with them and recognize that, their leaders will continuously be on the job. It's not, this is not. No, let me. Yeah, but let me. But let me. But let me.
For trouble here.
Yeah.
No way.
No, but
that's trouble right there. That's too easy.
Yeah, confidence in your leaders. Listen, and let me finish what I'm saying, and then because they did say, it's like you throw blood in the water and all the sharks just come across. Okay, no, but it is important that the community have confidence in the leaders. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's important that happen. It's right. it's it is important that happens, okay? And that is why as we campaign,
You're not gonna find any team like us.
as we campaign, the campaign is not just to say, okay, we are going to finally elect Kenneth Mapp. Okay, we are going to, Osbert Potter, he was a senator. Okay, we're going to let him now be lieutenant governor. To me, it's not about that, because you have a lot of teams running. You have a lot of individuals that have put themselves on the line. But the public, this is a time that the public needs some semblance of confidence in their leaders. It's not going to come easy, and everybody that put themselves up to be a leader is not going to merit and that kind of confidence. But it is important that as the leaders of the territory, you make sure that you do whatever you can to emanate that kind of confidence in your people, so that they can understand that there's hope.
Senator, I think right now is the time for us to be skeptical about our leaders and our leaders to prove themselves to the people.
And that
I think we've been beaten down to
that
the
is
ground.
correct.
And so
The battered girlfriend syndrome.
yes. And so there is no way you could expect the people of the VI to have any kind of confidence at all in what we've seen in the past 8 years and even prior. We've been beaten down. I mean, look at look at the state of the people. Look at us right here. Look at how every single person is struggling. Right now is the time for the leaders, for Lieutenant Governor Mapp, for yourself, to prove.
And that is where I am coming from, because listen. In the campaign, it's an opportunity to try to give options and alternative to the voters, and we are making the attempt to demonstrate that we are not going to be more of the same. Okay? More of the same is totally unacceptable. It's 100% unacceptable. We cannot be expected, and we know that we are not going in, if elected, and say we are just going to, hey, take the person from the steering wheel, we are going to go behind the steering wheel, and we are going to drive down the same road that they've been driving. Hey, that cannot work. You cannot expect to go in and plug into the same formula and expect anything different to happen. You cannot. Any crazy person on the street, no, you cannot do that. So we are saying that more of the same, totally unacceptable. We are showing and demonstrating and trying to demonstrate that there has to be creative approaches to how we are going to do things, and not just jump in, plug in, and drive down the road.
Okay. I want you to differentiate yourself from the other candidates, because you say you're not more the same. But some people may argue, you being a former lieutenant governor, serving in the Senate for so long, and also your running mate also being a senator, that, you guys are much a part of the problem, as you guys are claiming to be a part of the solution, based on your history. You're both extensive history in the Virgin Islands government. And we can all agree that we didn't just get here in the last 8 years. It was something that happened, the last 25, 30 years. And you guys are a part of that. So give us give us some the differences between you guys and other people that are out there running, and what innovative and what new things are you going to bring to the job? You guys have extensive history, but not what you've done in the past. But give us, the Clean Coal was a good start.
But that's the demonstration.
Yeah, that's a demonstration. But the Clean Coal was a good start. But give us some, concrete differences between your team and other teams that are out there, and some innovative new ideas that you plan to bring to the table once elected. Hold on.
Thank you. And to piggyback off of that, I think that would be a great platform, or that would be a good slogan if someone said their campaign was no more of the same. Because in the Caribbean, I like it's time to build. I'm a Christian. I love there's a scripture associated with that, and there is a time to build, but there's a time to move in. There's a time when you know in the Caribbean when people build in their house and they have to build it piece by piece by piece by piece by piece, and you just see a house that has never been finished, and you just think like they've been building for years and years and years, and they've been living downstairs and upstairs ain't done, and the roof's not on, and 20 years later, and I appreciate it's a time to build, so that's not a knock. But no more of the same is really what people are saying. So what I'm piggyback off of Mr. Scotland's question is, what do you see as the prototypical campaign stuff and promises, and what's your difference? Because no more of the same, meaning there's a same, and what's different about what's no more? Tell me the same, and then tell me the no more.
Well, in the context of community governance and development, we don't use negatives in the sense that negatives don't mean better. So that someone can say to you, no more of the same, and be worse. And that certainly would be no more of the same. Building and productivity is what we're striving at. And we're talking about building not in the context only of mortar and bricks, but in terms of value, in terms of standards, in terms of efficiency, and in terms of reward. And what distinguishes this team from the others is leadership, decisive leadership. Our history, and it's important, is replete with demonstrating that. Yes, we have been serving in the government in the past, and I listened to one of the candidates, which doesn't require any names, that said that if someone had served in the government before, that should be the community's reason not to consider them to be governor, because you don't need anybody who has any experience, because look at the condition of the community. Well, we know that don't make no sense. And so the question is, in our role of leading the public sector is where you're going to have the demonstration. Because if you look at our work in the roles that we played in the past, my role in the legislature, I have taken on issues that were controversial but were important for the community in terms of the finance companies, in terms of representing St. Croix in looking out for investment when we were doing major investments in the territory and insisting that St. Croix gets its share. In my role as a regulator in the Department of Licensing and Consumer Affairs back in the 80s, very little people knew anything in the Virgin Islands about food and medicine having dates on it. And I went into the Department of Licensing and Consumer Affairs and decided there will not be expired food on the shelves of this territory, and removed them and instituted penalties for them being offered for sale. Just as an example how bad it was, there were baby aspirins on the shelves of the stores in the Virgin Islands that had expired 7 years before they were still being offered for sale. There was no question in my regulatory role as Commissioner of Insurance and Chairman of the Banking Board that I've stood up to insurance companies and insist that they have to do what the law requires and protect the interests of the territory. I think I'm the first lieutenant governor that has had more than a single disaster under my tenure, but never had an insolvent insurance company. Because when I went into office and we reviewed them, those companies that were not properly capitalized, you either find the cash or you get out of business. When Cigna insisted that it was going to leave the territory on 7 days' notice and leave 33,000 people in the Virgin Islands, government employees, retirees, and their dependents without health insurance, I stood up as Commissioner of Insurance, said, you're not going anywhere, and implemented rules and regulations and the processes where there was a smooth transition that no one was left uninsured. In my role as the director of the Public Finance Authority, folks will tell you the bills that lawyers and underwriters and everybody was charging the government in terms of fees for financing for this government, that did not happen in my tenure. And the cost of borrowing money in the Virgin Islands was at its lowest ebb. During Governor Turnbull's term, the Virgin Islands had achieved, in the first time in its history, an investment grade rating in the financial markets. And that is all a result of taking the work and the responsibility that you're given and doing it. Now, that doesn't mean we don't care about the whole, but if you're given a task, if you look at the candidates that are running and they've had jobs and they've been working at the jobs, you need to look at how did they perform in that job before I promote them. It's not that they were a part of the Virgin Islands and the whole thing went bad, so everybody is bad. But how did these specific individuals demonstrate their concern and their care for the people of the territory by their performance or lack of performance? Anybody could show up to a job, sit in a desk, and get a paycheck. But folks to go to a job and perform and recognize that their work, that people rely on their work, and they don't have to know them and be related to them, but the performance of their work is important for a better quality of life, I suggest is someone who's demonstrating an ability to take the community to a positive step to the future.
So what have you seen in government, specifically in the governor's office, since you have direct experience in working there, and you're saying your team is different from what the Virgin Islanders have seen? They're different. We're going to see within your administration actual changes that are implemented that impact the person who's living on the streets. What has been what you've seen, and how are you different from what the same that we just talked about?
Well, I think in the demonstration of the last two gubernatorial races that we've been in, I think folks would acknowledge that in those conversations, I don't get into the personal discussions of people's lives, and for me, it has very little relevance to what's going on in the territory. I have a clear, decisive discussion on the issues. That's correct. And I think, just as an example in terms of how do we manage our relationship with the private sector, government is not the generator of opportunity and reward in a community. Government is a provider of service and protection and opportunity, but the private sector is the driver of economic reward and opportunity, because that's where the bread comes from. And our relationship with the private sector has to be real. What we have done in more instances than one is people arrive in the territory with a briefcase, sit down with a government, and make decisions and agreements that do not add value to the table, but remove value out of the society.
So what I'm hearing you saying is, in the past, the government of the Virgin Islands has used their authority and their power to,
they have not benefited. They've not made deals and contracts that were beneficial to the people of the territory in the long run.
Your administration will be different from previous ones in that,
and we have demonstrated that in the past,
and want the opportunity
exactly
to do that again.
Because it's
so
not
I think
about,
I want to see those side by side.
Our
government likes to do. I mean, and that speaks to some of the corruption that people are really concerned about with leadership. Is that leadership in the past have made decisions that are personally rewarding, or they reward people that they're connected to. But your administration wants to reward the people of the Virgin Islands, and so your business transactions will be different compared to that. So just kind of lining it up side by side, because people can sit on the streets.
What we're saying is that our work in managing agencies of this government, I mean, let's be clear. I mean, my role and responsibility in the Public Finance Authority was huge. I mean, I managed hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars for the people of the Virgin Islands. When we went into the office as just a simple analysis, I'm not indicting anyone. How you invest the monies of the government is important, and you're allowed to have certain returns on money. And when we went in for almost 14 years, the people of the Virgin Islands lost millions upon millions of dollars because their money were not invested properly. And within 4 years, I could say the previous 14, within 4 years, not only had we recovered every dime that they had lost, we had excess money that had to be set aside, that if we didn't have future losses, had to be turned over to the federal government in the area of municipal finance. So I'm only just simply saying that in the context that you look out for the interests of the people of the Virgin Islands is important. We have campaigns, and let's be serious. In every community in America where there are campaigns, there's going to be something called political patronage. Let's be real. the key, though, in the best interest of the community is how do you align the work that needs to be done with the skill? And how do you, the folks that benefit in that process, that they recognize that they're not be given an opportunity to sit down and reap the whirlwind, like you say, a new set of people come in, and now they're going to take everything, and everybody's still out here struggling. But how do they have to perform and do their work that the interest of this community is being advanced? How do we measure what's right and in the best interest of the majority of the people of Virginia? Why should your child go to school, go to college? 1,000 people graduating this last June. More than 80% of them will have to leave the territory. And their parents will be supporting them in universities and getting an education and skill. And because of the condition of the Virgin Islands, they will be left to build communities outside the Virgin Islands because there's no opportunity for them to come back home and work and build, whether in the public or the private sector, their own community and to be next to their families. So these are the challenges that Osbert Potter and I have to get into office and say, this is the direction that we're going to go that changes that cycle.
And speaking directly to that, what's going to be different about the Mapp Potter administration when it comes to the brain drain?
When we come back, you're gonna answer that question. We gotta take a short break, all right? So when you don't want a break, you just want to keep going, huh? Okay. When we come back, you'll answer that question. Then I have 2 more questions here. 102.1 FM Live Radio. This is the Virgin Islands Political Consortium. We are joined by gubernatorial candidate Mr. Kenneth Mapp, former Lieutenant Governor, and his running mate, Mr. Osbert Potter, of course, Mr. Ashley Scotland and Miss Maggie. We are here. We will be right back.
My mornings head I'm off my bed, chant a prayer to my Father and give thanks for a brand new dawn. This life that I'm living, it's not perfect, no, and sometimes nothing I want, but I'm trotting along, vibes into a new reggae song. Every day I aim, hoping for the best in life, oh, but I got no sleep. Him knows my heart, knows that I've been through so many stories, some left to be untold, but the future you hold. So I not gonna give up on my dreams. Better must come, better must come. We all have worked so hard, yo, we not this your vineyard. So I not gonna give up on my dreams. Better must come, better must come, better must come. I searched my heart and then I found the will to survive, even though my mind had so much doubt. Look and you'll see, even when things not pretty, most I supply every need. Me now have a chance of wanting, I got what put a roof over me head from night till morning come. And I'm not gonna break my stride, I'm alive, so I'll chase it away. Every evil thought that wants to come and mess with my mind, I'll chase it away. My future will be bright. So I not gonna give up on my dreams. Better must come, better must come. We all have worked so hard, yo, we not this your vineyard. So I not gonna give up on my dreams. Better must come, better must come, better must come. It will come. Whoa, whoa. Me just gotta hold the faith, yeah.
102.1 FM Live Radio. This is the VIPC. It has been brought to you by VIDecision2014.com. You go to that website, you're going to find a whole lot of information on there concerning the candidates, their platforms, their websites, where you could find them. Go to VIDecision2014.com for everything Virgin Islands political politics 2014. Mr. Scotland, you were speaking about brain drain. Go ahead with that question.
Yes. You were talking about kids not being able to come back home, and we go off island and we build communities elsewhere. So how is it going to be different? What plans or what things have you been trying to set up as you're running for office that's going to be different, that's going to bring back young people, like myself, back to the territory and help us participate in building the next Virgin Islands? Because the next Virgin Islands is going to have to come from people, like myself, the ages 35 and younger.
I have work for you. It's going to come by the real development and growth of the economy. It's going to come by this vision and fascination I have about getting the Virgin Islands to be the center of e-commerce of the nation. And it can be because, one, the infrastructure is in place. As a result of what Global Crossing did, the Virgin Islands, and St. Croix in particular, has the largest broadband capacity except New York, New Jersey. Silicon Valley in California does not have the broadband capacity that the U.S. Virgin Islands have. And because we have 7 intercontinental communications lines that come on the sea that come in at the end of Frederiksted. So it's a bastion as infrastructure-wise for the development of e-commerce. Second, what makes e-commerce so workable in the Virgin Islands if you attack the issue of energy cost is that we are one of the only 2 jurisdictions in America that can give you 90% abatement of your federal income tax obligation. No state in the union can do that. E-commerce is a clean industry that can start in no time, and it pays very well, very good wages, and it attracts the youngest generation in the territory. Second, I had a meeting with Dr. Hall at UVI when I ran in 2010 to have a conversation with him about our interest in developing a high-end accredited technical and vocational institute. Everything that we use in the Virgin Islands, in companies, in government, in hospitals, in your home, is driven by technology. You can't fix a car today with a wrench. If you don't have access to understanding how computers work and the boards that can communicate with that vehicle, you can't maintain it. But we don't train anybody to do that. The hospital, all of the equipment there, the companies, somebody got to fly in from outside to do the work because we're not training our people to be able to do that to service their own economy here in this territory. So we have to get very, very serious. And why I want it at the University of the Virgin Islands, because I don't want it hidden in the Department of Education so we can simply say we have it. We're talking about when Hovensa, for example, recognized that process servicing could not be trained at the vocational school at Hovensa, they went and sat with the University of the Virgin Islands and said, we will support a 2-year degree program for process servers to come into the plant, process operators, because the technology in the plant now requires that level of training. And if you didn't have an associate degree, you weren't going to get one of those jobs. And that's why we need to have a high-end technical vocational institute at the university. I don't want to get too much into the RT Park debacle, as I call it, of several weeks ago. But here's a building that over 15 years ago, we talked about a program. And no one recognized that at some point, technology had grown where this building didn't make sense anymore. We still spent $13.5 million and don't have a single company in the building, but we're giving people tax breaks who's supposed to be there. Okay? Now, if that was a technical institute, that we were training people and degreeing them in the ability to service technology, the implementation of the tools and services that service our economy, would the community have received more value? Mm-hmm. Would we recognize that technology is, the only term I could use is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's in our phone. It's in our car. It's in our Bluetooth. So you can't put a building and say, this is going to be technology. Technology is the air we breathe. And so if we don't get our community and our young people engrossed in this process and in this part of the economy, where are you going to come home to?
Which I was going to say, which leads to, technology is always evolving. You kind of have to be ahead of the curve to capitalize on it.
Yes.
The tech part was a good idea when it was first conceptualized, but by the time it was implemented and everything happened, we were behind. You were behind the eight ball.
We weren't quick enough to grasp that change and adjust accordingly.
So you talk about e-commerce. So how about how are you going to integrate e-commerce with, because young people today, I mean, the biggest builders of society, if you go through history, is building the middle class. Yes. You know, one of the hardest things is for our young people to come here to get from the working class or from the lower class to the middle class. Yes. And you know, one of the ways you can get there is by starting a business. Yes. You know, and most of the platforms that we've been hearing is talking about, you know, putting young people to work, but we haven't really heard any, you know, platforms about getting young people into business ownership. You know, Puerto Rico has a program where they're giving tax breaks to young people that start businesses through their, you know, version of the EDA. What are your plans in doing stuff like that with the e-commerce? Because it's great to have an indictment on something that happened in the past, but you know, kind of want to know how are you going to integrate e-commerce and our society in the future? What's the next 10 years from now? So because whatever you come in and you plan to do, if you're elected in the next 4 years or elected again in the next 8 years, you know, where do you see technology and e-commerce growing into the Virgin Islands in the next 8 years, where we're going to be able to take advantage of it when it's all said and done?
When we speak about e-commerce, we speak about it as a service industry. There will be no, for all intents and purposes, there will be no manufacturing industry in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I think global economics tell us that in terms of being competitive on an American soil, wages, conditions of work, manufacturing isn't the issue. High-end financial service sector, technology is the key. What we have that another brewing secret that's growing right here on St. Croix that people aren't recognizing is that the EDA program is evolving, where high-end servers of the financial industry and the technology industry is now growing in the Virgin Islands. Without calling companies' names, we have entities here, 70, 80 employees, establishing people working already. Minimum salary in the entity, $62,000. Not talking about the owners of the entity, managers, high-end salaries, 7 digits, all technology-driven. The platform in the Virgin Islands, insufficient communication platforms, I won't call companies' name, communication platforms, that they're investing $2, $3, $4 million to be able to drive the growth and development of their company. 70-odd employees, 56 local residents hired into that. You're going to have a doubling in one company, I can tell you about personally, will be doubling its employment force on St. Croix within the next 12 months. If we're able to deal with this issue with energy costs and then the infrastructure, not just government infrastructure, private sector industry infrastructure, then you're going to see entities showing up here that will be looking for people and training and growing folks in the Virgin Islands to be a part of this, that they will be able to offshoot and become and have their own businesses and contract out that services. Do you know that the parent managing entity of Cancer Center Treatments of America is right here in the U.S. Virgin Islands and growing in leaps and bounds in terms of their employment and staff? So the ability for attracting the high-end companies and the high-salaried entities in technology, this territory is well positioned, kinder and gentler. The nonsense that we do in the public sector that get in the way of progress is what we have to change. And while we have government employees that are produced and working well, now we have to invest in them and to help them to have and make sure they have the tools and the resources that they can do their job to facilitate the growth and development of the economy. In the agencies I know I've ran, and I'm sure Oswald will tell you the same thing, the worst thing that we do is we hire people and give them jobs and don't give them the tools and the training and the resources to do their jobs and then argue that they don't work. That's nonsense. We have to turn into government and right-size it. There are areas in the government that we don't have the number of employees that we need and the training that they need. And we have a few areas in government that we're doing stuff we don't need to do anymore. So we have to sit with unions and talk about lateral transfer of workers. Not that they don't need to lose salary and benefits, but we don't need them doing what they're doing over there with pencil and paper, but we need them over here doing stuff from a technological vantage point that gets the efficiency of the public sector up and get us to help facilitate progress and growth and not get in the way of companies and small businesses that are trying to survive in the community with the red tape.
Okay, so let's move forward here. So because of our geographical placement, we have varying needs per island, as I'm sure you are aware. So different initiatives must be undertaken that's unique to each island's success. Here's a hypothetical. You are governor right now, and the president of the United States, through Congress, managed to secure $900 million. That's to be used on 2 projects per island that will catapult each island to a prosperous future. In essence, the projects will jolt their respective economies and get things moving again. And your government must identify said projects immediately. Starting with St. Croix, moving to St. Thomas, and ending with St. John, what are the projects that you would immediately commence work on, and why?
Well, I clearly there will be, in the case of the Virgin Islands, a number of those projects will be the demolition of some of the schools and reconstruction of the school and institutions so that they can have the technological support to properly educate our children. Clearly, our infrastructure of roads and development throughout the territory is an important facet. Our telecommunication platforms are horrible. I mean, we have entities in the Virgin Islands boasting that if you pay $100 a month or $200 a month, you can get 8 megabytes of speed. 8 megabytes of speed you could get on the mainland for $19.99. So our ability to enhance our visitor experience in the territory, folks talk about bringing more tourists. We're not talking about making sure the tourists have a better experience when they're here. And if we don't improve the visitor experience, then the tourists, when they come, spends less dollars, so we need more of them to get the same amount of money. I think we call it in business school the Red Queen effect. You have to run faster just to keep the same position you're in. So you should know, and I would tell you that a Mapp administration's part of our strategy going forward is right in tune with what President Obama and even the Republicans are saying in terms of investing in rebuilding the infrastructure of America. And we intend to spend quite a deal of time in Washington with the new delegate working on a strategy to get specific projects funded. Governor Louis was instrumental in building 5 schools, 2 hospitals, and a major clinic in the Virgin Islands, and didn't float a single bond, and the federal government paid for all of it. And while they're talking about trillions and zillions, we need hundreds of millions to get our infrastructure moving to become a part of the modern economy of this nation. And we are reliant on that. And that's why we say there is going to be a conversation in this campaign through November about when folks have had opportunities to serve the public, what did you do with the time that you were given? Because it's not about getting promoted.
So, clear, but you did not give me any specifics per island.
Because we're campaigning and not governing, and in that context, obviously when we get into the government and get full access to the books and to understand clearly where we're at with these specific projects, then a more specific response to your question could occur. We certainly could sit here and say, okay, well, 450 million, 30 million here, 20 million there, but I think in the context of our conversation and the whole discussion that we're having, talking about infrastructure building and improvement to create an economy and to drive a new sector in the territory that pays well and give our young people the opportunity and a bastion for home is the point we're trying to make. So
the reason for the question, though, however, is realizing that, of course, because of our geographical placement, we have different needs or different economies, of
That's
course.
Correct.
And
that's
certain projects would drive and jolt the economy.
And that's
I
why
wanted to fish your knowledge on St. Croix specifically, and of course all the islands. But there are supposed to be certain things in a candidate's mind that would say, you know what, this is what I want to work on right now that would jolt St. Croix. This particular right here would help St. Thomas's economy, and the same for St. John. I would like you to identify said projects.
Well, all right.
And
well, in the context of our conversation, that's why I was very specific. One, to talk about the need as a priority to deal with energy. Two, I spoke specifically about the broadband capacity that comes into St. Croix that gives it the ability to drive e-commerce and in the territory as an industry. Regarding St. Thomas, for example, and so I'm saying that while St. Croix need to have initiatives and will have access to tourism as part of an economy, I think most people would remember I'm a big fan of sports tourism and how you develop St. Croix for sports tourism in terms of when we talked about the development of our sports facilities. The e-commerce and St. Croix as a platform for that is the big opportunity to do big things for the territory and do big things for the island of St. Croix and the people of the territory. St. Thomas is a premier destination in the Caribbean. And even with the improvements that have been taking place in some of the other islands, and even the fact that St. Thomas lost its premier as in terms of the largest number of visitors recently, when you speak to cruise ship executives, and they were here just in the past month, and you talk to folks from the hotel industry, they tell you that if we are able to drive the visitor experience to a higher level, as opposed to just simply trying to pack more people on the island, you would see how St. Thomas would really rebound, and you would get visitors and particularly overnight guests that would spend more money. Let's be candid. We haven't built a single new hotel in the territory in 30 years. How are we going to compete in the Caribbean by being that stale? And we have projects that are on the book in terms of hotel development in St. Croix, and we have high-end projects on the book for hotel development on the island of St. Thomas. I think St. John, and I agree with you that the three islands are not three little kids that are 8, 9 years old and 10 years old, and you put them all in the same shirt and the same pants and the same pair of shoes, and everybody go out looking the same. They're now adults, and they have their own characteristics and their own uniqueness, and we need to support them so that they become three powerful economic drivers in the Caribbean region. And I'm hopeful that I'm responding to your question without going down your $900 million budget.
It's okay.
You see, we're not so bad that you could tell a politician you have $900 million and he ain't line item how you're going to spend every penny.
Okay, but
because the picture, the focus has to be grander.
It has to be grand. So what about St. John? What about St. John?
St. John is a unique, it's an ecotourism bastion. And because more than 75% is owned by the national park, that becomes a driver for that type of tourism. I think what St. John lacks is infrastructure for its local community. We don't birth St. Johnians. We have made St. Johnians extinct because you can't be born on St. John. We have highways running through national parks in America, but we have a road that gets you from Cruz Bay to Coral Bay directly closed, and people saying you can't drive through that because that's the national park. We have schools on national park property in the U.S. mainland. And we still have the Department of Interior and the National Park Service saying to us in the Virgin Islands that children in St. John have to get up 4 o'clock, get on a boat at 6 o'clock to get to school, and reverse the process in the evening. So we have to deal with those issues in a very, very real way.
Okay, so you mentioned, of course, St. Thomas's main offering being tourism, and how you would expand on that and work on that. Yes. Is there a buffer that you would work on for St. Thomas? So let's say tourism, for some reason, has declined. What would St. Thomas rely on, or what would they fall back on to keep the economy sustainable, apart from tourism? So we know
tourism as a staple, as an industry, actually, this is not a summary about you. I want to put in context the term you're using about tourism declining and not being an option for St. Thomas. That's sort of oxymoronic in the sense that the largest growing industry on the planet is tourism.
And so I understand that.
Because as money become more accessible to people, people travel.
I understand that. Go ahead, Mr. Scott.
Yes, but I mean, even with that, if you look at our world economy, there's more money being pumped in the economy, but it's being split between the haves and have-nots. Less people are having more money, meaning the middle class is disappearing, not just in America, but across the world in general. So you have less people with access of money and means to travel. And then where my point was going to be, maybe not tourism declining on a national scale, but even as far as St. Thomas, what happens when Cuba is opened up again? And that becomes, because it was the premier destination for tourism before the borders were closed. What happens when Cuba opens up again? Like, I guess what his question is, what is the second industry in St. Thomas? For instance, we relied on Jovensa for so long here at St. Croix, and no one would have ever thought that Jovensa would close its doors. I mean, it was something that we thought would always have Jovensa. I mean, that was one of a big reason you heard people talking about why St. Croix needs to be separated from St. Thomas and all this other stuff, because we had Jovensa. No, but Jovensa didn't shut down. Right. So what happens, like we having foresight, what is the next industry in St. Thomas?
I'm saying
not
that I am
all
saying
of our
that
eggs in one basket, and it has been historical that we can we have done that.
Unlike an industry, I am saying to you that the next big industry in the territory is e-commerce. Whether it's St. Croix, St. Thomas, I'm saying St. Croix has the capacity because the bandwidth capacity comes here, but that is across the territory, because of the fact that we have the cables that run between St. Croix and St. Thomas that makes that bandwidth capacity accessible. But I don't want to diminish, and I want to emphasize that the reason we have declines in tourism and spending dollars on St. Thomas, and every business on St. Thomas will tell you, is because the experience of the visitor has declined. And so it is like if you I like to use this example because you're all young and you all have young families, and if say your kids get around 5-6 years of age, you got 2 or 3 kids, and you say, you know what, every summer you say to your wife, and in your case your husband, they say, let's take the kids to Orlando. If you took them to Orlando every summer until they're 18, they will never have the same experience, because the whole success of that model of tourism in Orlando is, never mind the machines behind the walls and the motors are all the same, is that the experience of the families and the visitors when they get there appear different and fresh. And what we need to be talking about in St. Thomas is that when the cruise ship passengers come, and this is another conversation, the cruise ships want them to really spend the money on the ships. So the boats are coming in later in the morning and leaving late in the afternoon. And what we need to be able to do, working with the private sector in St. Thomas, is to get the experience value so high that when they get back on the ship, people are saying, I wanted to do this and I wanted to do that, but I didn't have time. You know what? I need to come back here, and I need to fly back here with the family. And that's why you're going to need good hotel development, branded hotel development, because when you push the experience factor up, people will come back to immerse themselves in that experience and have a good time. When they're stuck in traffic, they can't get around, they can't move, they said, geez, I'm better. I was back in New York City. This is crazy. I spend money to get on a boat and to go to the islands, and I just breathe fumes for a whole hour. Right. So we have to change that.
And to get to the point that Kenny was just talking about, the experience is critical, and when you talk about the possibility of losing tourism, you will lose tourism as an industry if you don't keep up with the industry, if you don't make yourself competitive. So in getting an administration set up and having individuals in the positions to do these things and to be the expert in these fields and in these areas, that's part of not more of the same that we referenced earlier. You want to not necessarily just put your friends in positions of authority and to head agencies and entities when you get elected. You want to put competent, professional people that are able to now have the vision, share the vision, and be a part of the energy and the excitement and the new approach that we will bring to the table, and there will be a continuation of such. And just to give, make reference here, if you are familiar with St. Thomas, where the cruise ships come in and Havenside, you know that you have seen construction going on there for about 5 years. You understand what I'm saying? And that cannot lead to a good experience. That cannot lead to a good experience. Those things retard the progress. It retards the process. So as leaders, you can't let those things happen. Okay. And as leaders, you must, have the vision, take the bull by the horn, and make sure that things that you know must be in place in order for progress to happen. You don't sit on a job and just allow it to just go on. And that's the not more of the same that we are talking about.
Okay. 102.1 FM Live Radio. This is Virgin Islands Political Consortium. We are joined, of course, by gubernatorial candidate, former Lieutenant Governor Kenneth Mapp, and his running mate, former Senator Osbert Porter. And the show has been brought to you by VIDecision2014.com. It's been brought to you.
No, what I mean is you finished?
No, we are finished. No. Yeah. Thanks for the correction. No, we ain't done yet. We got some more questions. Okay, sorry about that.
Well, it's good to see that, I have to tell you, I am enjoying tremendously. I'm enjoying the energy in this room and the conversation and the exchange of ideas, and this is what building is about, and we look forward to continuing this, because this is how governance should take place.
Yes. Amen. So, and I don't know if you saw last Thursday's Daily News, but one of the big features in there was the same-sex marriage debate that's now ongoing in various circles around the Virgin Islands. Brought to the forefront by a bill introduced by Senator Judy Buckley that seeks to change the language of the now standing law, which makes plain that marriage is between a man and a woman in the Virgin Islands, to marriage being between two persons. Will the bill come for vote before this election season? I don't think so. But rest assured that one day it'll reach the governor's desk. That governor might just be you, Lieutenant Mapp. So here's a direct question. There's a bill on your desk. Its contents would legalize same-sex marriage if signed into law. However, if vetoed, it once and for all obliterate the same-sex marriage debate in the Virgin Islands. I know you'd laugh at that point. Would you veto the bill directly now, or would you sign it into law?
If a same-sex marriage bill came to my desk, and let's acknowledge that that's still quite a ways off. Senator Buckley's bill actually hasn't even left legal counsel, and she doubts very seriously if it will make it out for it to even be introduced.
Right.
But the short answer to your question, if a same-sex marriage bill arrived on my desk, and it did not, as long as it does not require churches or anyone to perform any particular type of marriage under the issue of a person's civil right and the behavior of consulting adults, I personally would sign it. I would not stand in the way of that. I think that what's going on in the nation, what's going on with the judiciary of America, makes it very clear that the prohibition of same-sex marriage is being looked as an act of discrimination. In a number of states where the public have gone out and actually voted to amend provisions of their constitutions banning same-sex marriage, we are seeing the federal system and the federal courts ruling that those provisions are unconstitutional. So I am not going to be introducing or sending any bill to the legislature on the marriage issue. I think we have laid out here that we have a lot of priority issues that we think needs to be addressed. But to be clear to the listening audience, I will not stand in the way if a properly constructed marriage bill should arrive on my desk.
Okay, thanks for the direct answer on that. So we don't have to labor here all day. But let me ask another question. In you personally, yes. Do you think that marriage should be between a man and a woman? No, this is personally your view.
I think that what consulting adults do is their business, and I think that the reality that I have seen in my lifetime, where people have decided to have lives together And when folks get older and they get ill and they have assets, they have no ability to have a proper division of it. They have no right to speak to what they have consented to do as two people in their lives, and I don't think we should continue doing that. So I don't have a problem in terms of civil unions and the recognition of same-sex marriages.
Okay. So personally, again, you believe, your belief is that marriage
I believe it's a civil issue. I think it's a civil right issue, and
okay.
people have the right, and I don't think we should discriminate against them as a result of that.
I had a question. I don't know why it just left me.
Because I answered it.
Amazingly. No, I had something. It just go ahead, Mr. Scotland. Let me see if I retain my thought there.
My next question to you would be: what is your stance on decriminalization and legalization of marijuana?
All right,
just left me.
That too is a very that too is
go ahead.
That too is a very interesting question, and I hear a number of candidates saying this, that I am for the medicinal use of marijuana. And what you're saying is, I am for someone who is terminally ill having access to something that can help them. And that doesn't seem to take a whole lot of courage to say that. Ultimately, I believe that the continued criminalization of simple possession and personal use of marijuana is no longer efficient and sufficient. We spend about $80,000 a year to house an inmate in our prison systems, and I could tell you that money would be a lot better spent somewhere else. Is the Virgin Islands ready to go from illegal criminalization of marijuana straight to decriminalization and or legalization overnight? No, it is not. It's an issue of process in terms of what's involved, what's the protection of our young people. What do we do with people who have been convicted of simple possession of marijuana in the past, and their records will preventing them and giving them hardship to access to the economy? How would the sale of marijuana take place in the Virgin Islands, and who would have access to be able to doing that? What role would it play, if any, in the economy? And what kinds of revenue, if any, the government would derive from that? The national government is showing its movement in how we're handling the whole issue of hemp and marijuana in the nation. Just the last 6 weeks, the U.S. Department of Justice and the Department of Treasury has now established and written rules and regulations that give pot shops access to the financial service markets in America. And all that simply means is now they can do wire transfers, they can accept credit cards, they can make deposits. So it is rolling in as a part of the economy of the nation. But you simply can't have a bill on your desk that says today marijuana is illegal, and tomorrow it's illegal. The issue is an issue of process. Ultimately, down the road, if you ask me personally, to some extent, I don't have a problem with legalizing marijuana. But sitting as a governor, I know that you can't go from where we're at with marijuana today to that. It is a process. It is how do you protect our young people and youth about it? How do you provide for the proper education of this substance and issues like that?
Okay, let me go back to a point I wanted to make. I remembered concerning the same-sex bill and whatnot. I wanted to ask this question because a lot of the listening audience may be faith-based people. And
I am faith-based. Okay. I am a Christian
I was about
as
to ask,
of 1986.
You're a Christian.
Yes,
and
I accept the death of Jesus Christ on the cross as washing my sins and providing me salvation. I am a practicing Christian.
You're a practicing Christian.
That's correct.
Okay, so and it has no effect on how you would govern in terms of the same-sex marriage issue.
I am very clear and understanding in the system that we use that the issues of the church are not always issues of the state. Mm-hmm. And I recognize that the civil rights of others shouldn't always be governed by my religious beliefs. Mm-hmm. I'm not making any excuse. I will only say this, and I don't know if you should correct me if I'm wrong. It's really my responsibility to get me into heaven. Mm-hmm. It's not my responsibility to go around and take my morality and my religion and say that others must do that. If an action does not provide detriment and harm to the society as a whole, it is the basis by which we should measure.
Good point. And to that end, if an action doesn't, like you said, destroy our community in essence, then that's okay. But don't you think implementing, and I just want your opinion on this now, signing a same-sex law bill into law in the Virgin Islands and all the different things that go with it. So you would have to, provide different a set of curriculum in our schools to make provision for same-sex. Just a whole, I think it affects the economy, not the economy, the nation in various ways. It's
right,
like, and so you don't think that will affect society that's been based upon marriage being between a man and a woman, family being raised. Go ahead, sir.
But don't run over the process.
Okay.
Let's run through the process. If a bill comes up like that, there's going to be tremendous discussion. Folks are going to have their ability to go and to make their case at the legislature and to discuss issues. We do this all the time.
Right.
Bills are amended or changed based on the input of the society.
Okay.
Some folks may say, well, maybe it requires a referendum. There'll be a lot happening before such a bill could arrive on the desk of a governor.
Right.
All I am suggesting, and in the question you asked me, you wanted to know, ultimately, had that entire process taken place,
right,
and a bill arrived on your desk, how would you act?
Understand.
And I was responding to how I would act and saying that as long as a bill didn't make it a requirement that churches had to perform these marriages or groups had to perform these marriages, that just today, as our marriage law gives anyone who's authorized to perform a marriage ceremony, it gives them the right to decline and say, no, I don't wish to perform your ceremony, and you have to go somewhere else, and there's no reaction to that. I'm saying in that context, if once that whole process goes through and the legislature and the community decides that's what they want to do and they send a bill to Government House, my personal reaction and instinct is I will not stand in the way of someone's civil rights.
Understood.
Let me just interject, and I know you're the one asking the questions, but let me just ask you a question.
Okay.
In that eventuality, if in fact a bill does come to the governor's desk and it's signed for same-sex marriage, what role does the church have at that point in time, and how involved and how aggressively would the church involvement be if that is to happen?
So if the bill has been passed, and even before a bill is passed, I believe it's the church's responsibility to show love to people of any color, any creed, any sexual orientation. So, and that is what we should continue doing. You're going to have same-sex couples coming to your church.
Right.
They just...
I suspect you have them coming now.
They're coming now. And where I think we haven't done a really good job as a church is to educate ourselves, our congregants, as to how we should treat people of different sexual orientation. To answer your question, we would continue. I think it is the church's role to continue showing love and continue educating. Now, not diverting from what the Word of God says, because we ought to stand on that staunchly and not, stray from that. But again, I believe the Word itself speaks of showing love to all people and not being judgmental, so to speak. So that is what I think we should be doing.
And the church's
go ahead, Brenda.
And the church's role would be to be involved in that that process.
Yeah.
So having public opinion, sharing their voice, getting involved in having their voice be heard as it relates to how this bill
And I agree.
is crafted. And
I agree 100% that should be the church's role, but I was a little confused a few days ago in St. Thomas when someone approached me with that question in general, and was just in the discussion part, it sort of brought the sense that the church is ready to condemn individuals who may feel that way, same-sex individuals, that the church is ready, from the individual. Now, I don't know if that individual speaks for the church and is qualified to speak for the whole church, but that individual was walking around with a petition ready, getting signatures against same-sex marriage. And I just engaged in a discussion with them to try and find out, well, where does the balance come in from the church's standpoint, where you're supposed to show love and inclusion and appreciation for everyone, but then at the same time, this lady that was representing that position from the church seemed ready to condemn individuals who would engage in that same-sex marriage activity, and in my view, bypassing the natural love that God preaches.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Scotland.
I think I don't know. I wasn't in for the person direction, but I think I guess the movement is more about, not necessarily coming on against same-sex marriage, although it is, but in support of traditional marriage, or traditional marriage between a man and a woman. I think if I don't know if you're talking about the one voice petition, that's what their message is more about. I don't necessarily know what the particular individual, but the message is more about, it's more a positive, spin to it. It's in support of traditional marriage, because like Ernest said, it's always important to show the love of God. God talks about, hating the sin, not the sinner, right. So, but I think the role of the church, is that, is not, it's in support of what the word of God talks about, and it is in supporting, and that's what we're pushing, is the pushing in support of traditional marriage, not necessarily, but not to condemn, but also not to endorse same-sex marriage. We want to be clear about that.
I will not deny that there is homophobia in the Caribbean, and it is rampant. In some islands, people are killed on a regular, and it is actually supported for people to abuse, misuse, and discriminate against people who have decided to have same-sex relationships and marriages. And so I think we have a homophobic issue in the Caribbean that is another issue altogether,
and in our community in general,
right?
Yes.
And in our community in particular, we have an issue, and
community of color.
Yes, and it's hugely taboo. And so you've got that issue on top of the church trying to really ward off something that they see is coming from Europe that is now in America, that's going to eventually trickle down to us. There are churches who have had to shut their doors. They were sued by other churches because churches had to come to a decision of what they believe on this issue. And as a result, people have lost property. People have lost their presence in communities, because once a law is passed, and I think the church is responding in probably in fear. I can't speak for churches. I mean, pastors need to speak up and get in touch with candidates and speak with governors and speak with their legislatures. But I think there are people who are afraid that as soon as we do one thing, we're going to end up like Europe, which is post-Christian at this point, because you passed one, you took prayer out of schools, and now we have a violent, like you can see from the date something is signed, the trickling effect. And so I think, I can't speak for that woman, and I hope that she is able to balance justice and love. And maybe she did not do a good job of that. And I've seen a lot of people not do a good job of that. I want to apologize, because people are unable to have conversations with Christians because Christians are ignorant on things, and you can't take one scripture in the Bible and beat it over people's heads. You need to get involved in the issues, get involved politically, so that when something like this shows up on the governor's desk, we have had real conversations. It's not just the Bible told me so, but we've had real conversations, and we're able to articulate that from a Christian perspective. And Christian doesn't mean that people feel the same way, so I mean, it'll be interesting to see if we can say, if you sign this thing into law, what effect will it have? Like, if we put a casino in Christiansted, what effect does it have on the island? We need to look at the pros and the cons of how it affects us economically, how it affects us culturally, socially, etc., and how it is a detriment to our community. And the church is responsible to communicate that as well as the politician.
But also, to be fair, you have, I guess, ignorance on the other side of the argument too. It may be that the person that spoke to you may have been homophobic, but it also may have been, they may have dealt with other people that didn't necessarily agree with what they were doing and attacked them, because it was equally aggressive. So now it put on its armor, because they become defensive because we're focusing on the Christians, and we have to show love, and that's what Christ called us to do. That's true, but also we never
even
really,
as a Christian, sometimes we have to discipline in love.
We discipline in love, but also we don't spend a lot of time talking about is on the other side.
Too
know,
lash,
people
but I
like-
love you.
Yeah.
I had a lot of that from my grandmother,
Yeah.
and it made me the person I am.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right, we got to move on here. We're way past budget, but let's continue with 2 more questions. Mr. Scotland?
Yeah. Okay. Well,
So we go for 2 more hours.
No, let me just say. Many blame the. Go ahead, Mr. Scotland, quickly.
okay. Because I was kind of we're kind of on the the moral side of the stuff. We're talking about marijuana, and then I also wanted to get your.
But I didn't know if I was able to have that if I was my question was I didn't know if I had responded to your question.
Yeah, I mean, you had responded, and I wanted to come back. One of the things you were talking about, if I can remember, because it was other conversation. Which you said, if I'm wrong, correct me, that we criminalize marijuana right now. You being a former, person of law enforcement and stuff, you've driven around this island before. Can you confidently say that we criminalize smoking of marijuana right now? Because I personally don't think we do.
Criminalize it?
Yes, it's criminalized. I mean, we've heard that stat before about people being arrested and it's being on their record and stuff like that. No one has been able to bring up a statistic about how many people right now we have serving in our jails right now, just in jail for simple possession of marijuana. And then on top of that, there is recourse right now. It's laws on the books. We had Judge Sarah speak about it. Spoken to other attorneys about it. Where if you're convicted, so let's say of simple possession, which really does happen, you can get the record that you can get it expunged. You can get expunged off of your record.
Well, you can get anything expunged off your record if you follow the process and you get the officials to agree and you have the political connections that they agree to do that. There is no process in Virgin Islands statute that you can just follow once you have been convicted of a crime in the Virgin Islands that just simply expunge your record. Now, you can have agreements in terms of plea agreements that says, all right, you do this, you get through this probationary period, and we'll wipe your record clean, and that's part of your sentence, and that will happen automatically. But if you're convicted of a crime, the only way other than going through the judicial process of petition is through, let's say, a governor pardoning you and cleaning your record. There's not a process that everybody can go in and say, okay, here's the application, fill this out. If you do all these things, then your record will be clean. That we don't have such a statute in the Virgin Islands, and so no one should make the claim, particularly if they're an attorney, that such a statute exists.
Well, but to be fair, the claim has been made over and over again about all these young men that we have sitting in Golden Grove for simple possession of marijuana, when that is also not true.
Well,
it's not true.
I don't know the perspective in which you say all these young men.
No, but that's a claim. When people are proponents of legalizing marijuana and particularly decriminalizing it, the claim is made that we have all these young men that could be doing productive things in society that are simply in jail for smoking marijuana.
Right. Okay,
which is not true.
That's not the claim I'm making. I am saying to you that there are people in the criminal history of the Virgin Islands that have been convicted of simple possession of marijuana. I don't know that we don't charge people for smoking marijuana, but simple possession of marijuana. And there are people, and particularly people of less wealth or no wealth, because of not having access to proper representation, that have gone to jail and have criminal records for simple possession of marijuana in their younger age and may be very productive adults and members of the society today, because the use and smoking and possession of marijuana didn't start in the 2000s. It's been going on, and it got very popular in the 60s.
Okay.
All right. And we're saying that if we're going to decriminalize marijuana or even move further to the legalization of some quantity of marijuana, part of that process should take into considerations those persons whose life is still affected by having a criminal conviction of something that we're now saying should be legal. And I'm just saying part of the process and part of the conversation has to include all of these variables. Now, we're not talking about thugs running with guns and the violence, possession in terms of drugs, cocaine and crack, etc. We're talking specifically about marijuana. But I was a police officer, and in the 70s, people went to jail for possession of an ounce of marijuana.
Okay, let's move on. We don't have much time, Mr. Scotland. We got to move on.
I know it's not about marijuana. It's the next
Okay,
question.
hold on. Let me. This one pertains. Hold on, Mr. Scotland.
I'm getting in trouble because we appreciate the time, but you're going to say, I give we the same amount of time.
I'm trying to go. Speaking about marijuana and drugs and crimes, many blame the crime problem in the Virgin Islands on youth who've lost their way, the lack of jobs, and other social problems. But what's often neglected is the high level of corruption amongst the ranks that's supposed to be protecting us. And you see it now being played out in real time with the Tapia case that's dominated the media in recent times. I'd like to know, what are your plans to curb the crime issue in the Virgin Islands, and how you plan to clamp down on corruption, not only in the police department, which but also, in government as a whole?
Well, again, very extensively, we've spoken about this whole issue of law enforcement, and we've talked about the need for the modernization of law enforcement in the territory. And we need to change the incentive in the crime area from the solution of crime, because that's how you measure success in many law enforcement, and particularly in the Virgin Islands, is how many cases you solve. We don't really talk about how many crimes we prevent, and that's we need to really focus on that. The whole issue with corruption or anti-corruption starts with the very nature of your being and how you operate. And again, Osbert Potter and I have managed governmental entities and have been subject to audits, and haven't had the question about the finances under our control and responsibility being skewed, and people wondering where they're at, and crazy contracts. And so if that is not something you tolerate and are involved in, the people that are under you must recognize, and you will demonstrate that by your reaction and behavior to corrupt acts, and you only have to demonstrate it once or twice, and people get the message that it is something we simply do not tolerate and will not accept. Crime fighting in the Virgin Islands is not only going to come in terms of how we deal with the criminal element, but really the reality, and you mentioned it as part of your question, is going to come in how we create opportunities. And I think we had a very robust and good discussion in terms of how we drive economics, how we create training, and how we create opportunity for our young people.
Okay, we're about to close. We're way over budget right here.
Budget? That is measured by the kilowatt hour burn.
Yes. Yeah, we gotta go. I want you, a whole lot of other questions to ask, and you'll be back on here.
We'll come back post primary.
Post primary, yes, indeed.
Okay.
We'll be back here post primary. But I want you to make your final case. To the people of the Virgin Islands, those listening right now, they want to know. Listen, why you? I know you've explained it in various ways, but why don't you condense to the people why they should select you and your running mate as the next governor of the United States?
And to piggyback off of that, I'm looking at your, I think 2006 and 2010 runs. You did not win the seats. It was like you were 43%. You kind of hover around 42 point something, 43 point something, and just close enough. But that 10, 7 to 10% or points that speak to
steps.
You're on the steps, but people are making a decision that 7 to 10% is costing you your seats. So we want to hear from you. What do you think about?
I actually am very heartened, and I am very sincere when I say I personally am tremendously humbled by the admiration and the respect that the people of the Virgin Islands confer on me. The people of the Virgin Islands have been very, very good to me. I come from a farming family, and without even completing my formal education at the time, I have been entrusted with tremendous responsibility and growth and opportunity in the Virgin Islands. All happened because of the support of the Virgin Islands public, and I remain indebted to the people, and I'm humbled by that. The distinction with Osbert Potter and I with other teams that are running is simple. It is decisive leadership, and it is about accountability. It's about getting the work done. It's about listening and understanding the fundamental cause of the problem and solving it there. It's not about putting a Band-Aid, and I'm borrowing this from T.D. Jakes. It's not about putting a Band-Aid on cancer. It's about getting into the root of the problem and finding out what that issue is and resolving it. Not, as Osbert said earlier today, waking up in the morning and say, what is today's crisis we need to solve? But getting ahead of the curve. And so we thank you guys, and I'm going to turn the mic over to Mr. Porter, but we thank you, and I thank you for giving us the opportunity, and we ask the community to look at us in a holistic manner in terms of how we approach the issues, our history of who we are, our demonstration of our work in the past, our integrity, and the energy that we have to perform the duties of governor and lieutenant governor. And we ask, we're not running in the primary, we are independent candidates, so we will only be on the ballot on November 4th, and we ask each of you within the sound of our voice for your support, we ask for your prayers, and we ask you for your guidance.
And again, I want to thank 102.1 FM for having us here to just have a discussion.
Wasn't too bad, was it?
No, I was told that we were coming to the Lions Den, you know what I'm saying? But no, that wasn't your job. But we believe that leadership is what's needed now. There's the ability to lead on solid ground, the ability to understand and recognize where we are and where we need to go is very critical. It's not just say, well, I should be governor, I would love to be governor, I would love to be lieutenant governor. We have a responsibility to the people of the Virgin Islands to rescue this territory right now. This territory is in need of being rescued. We are at a point where we cannot do more of the same. I have said that this morning. In all honesty, we cannot do more of the same. We must find leadership that is creative and energetic and has proven in the past that they can get the job done. I have been at Channel 12 for the last 10 years, and you can see where Channel 12 was prior to my arrival and where it is now as just a sample of the creativeness, the whole process of just understanding what problems are and finding ways to resolve them, because that's what this whole thing will be about, understanding all the varied aspects of all the problems we have and finding creative and effective ways to resolve them. And I accepted running with Kenneth Mapp because I have full confidence in his ability. I was asked to be running mates for other candidates, and I did not feel that passion and that confidence the way I feel with Kenneth Mapp. And I really think that the public has a perfect opportunity now to utilize the knowledge and experience and capacity that we have here in Kenneth Mapp in helping us to take this territory forward and rescue it from where it is right now.
Okay.
One quick point.
Sure.
Only because I was instructed.
Okay.
And I'd like to follow through. The Virgin Islands community is beginning to see ad campaign that we rolled out, and you're going to be seeing it all across the territory. You're going to see more in St. Croix.
I ask you about that. It's in my questioning right here.
Yes.
It's to me, it's very. Can I be honest?
Sure.
It's a bit strange.
Okay.
And it catches my attention, but I don't know what to think of it. So you have all. Can you please explain?
I'm not sure which one you saw.
I saw the one right here by the
Sign
Sign
Farm
Farm stoplight with the woman being abused.
Yes.
And
it speaks to the issue of domestic violence.
Right.
The domestic violence incidences in the Virgin Islands are back to the 1983 levels when we wrote the first domestic violence statutes, and I was one of the authors of that bill when I was chairman of the Committee on Public Safety and Judicial Affairs, working with Mary Mingus and the Women's Coalition and Jada Finchine, who was the then Attorney General. domestic violence in this territory is back at that level. So it's one of the issues that we raised. What you're seeing in the ad campaign is the critical issues confronting families and the community. We're accentuating it because we're saying to the community that this campaign and election is not about politicians. It's about the issues that affect your lives. So you're going to see issues about with a young gentleman, and we're talking about agriculture and technology as opportunity. You're going to see an ad that speaks to quality health care for senior citizens and affordable health care. You're going to see one about having secured retirement and access to retirement, one with some young girls and technology about hope for the future. You're going to see one that deals with the rising costs of living in the Virgin Islands, power, gas, food, and the struggle of families to deal with that, because these are the issues that are affecting the people in this community, and these are the issues that we want to talk about. And when we talk about building, we're not talking about building with just blocks and mortars. You see an ad campaign that addresses the issue of single working mothers and their struggle to balance their responsibilities with their family and their profession. You're going to see one about a small business owner who's struggling under government bureaucracy, higher taxes and fees, and the cost of energy and doing business and having to cut payroll and balance just how do we survive. Yeah. And these are just the real issues that affect the community. So we're not rolling out because it's not time for us. It's time for you, the people of the Virgin Islands. It's time that we address these issues in a real way.
And your motivation in doing that is to show that you know the issues, to show that you have solution to the issues.
That's
What are you?
The motivation is to let the community know that we're hearing them crystal clear on the issues that are affecting them, and that these are the issues that are going to be at the forefront of our campaign and how we're going to be addressing them.
Okay, great. So before we close, how has the campaign trail been for you? How has it been?
I enjoy campaigning. I enjoy folks. Yeah. I listen. I'm an older guy, so I listen more than I speak. And I thank the community. We thank the community for its warm embrace and its reception.
You think you got St. Croix on lock? You think you're going to win St. Croix?
I'm not. I don't have anything on lock.
Okay.
I am. We are out there and we're appealing. We're going to have our formal kickoff of the campaign next weekend. St. Thomas on Friday, St. John on Saturday, and here on St. Croix on Sunday. Our campaign headquarters in St. Croix is in Peters Rest across from Corsi Les. In St. Thomas, it's in Lockhart Gardens across from Oswald Harris Court, where next to VI Bridal. And in St. John, it's in the Lumber Yard. And I know you were going to catch that. And
no, I actually am thinking. I was thinking about who do you want to run against. That's the question.
Right.
I want to ask, who do you want to run against? Who do you think you're going to run against?
We want to win and start governing in January.
You want to skip over?
Okay.
You're going to have to run against someone though.
So let's be realistic then. Let's be realistic. You may win or you may not. If your bid is not successful or if it's unsuccessful, will this be the last time you run for governor?
That's a question you'll have to ask me as we run for re-election. That's a question you'll have to ask me when we run for re-election in 2018.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you
so much. You're very welcome. Thank you for having us.
For joining us today. Very, very good interview. We wish you much success with your campaign as you continue to do.
And we ask for your continued prayers and support.
All right.
Thank you.
God bless you. This is the Virgin Islands Political Consortium. We're going to be right back, of course, with the